How do Muslims in the present day world that is full of riba-based business transactions, how do they cope? They cope by not participating. How will they not participate? They will not participate by looking for alternatives, one of which you mentioned. You mentioned a bank that is known for not charging interest on their loans and things like this. Even in the West, in England, in America, there are banks that are zero interest banks now, especially after the failure the world saw of capitalism in the last 5 to 6 years, when they themselves announced that they have failed. Even in the US at that time, they started asking for interest-free loans. And many of those banks that erupted at that time in the West are still there till today. So we only have to look for alternatives. Some of those banks, influential Muslims. Many of the banks you see today in Nigeria, Muslims have strongholds in them. It means if the Muslims are educated and enlightened enough and are resolved to change the tide of events, we are really capable of changing it. What is left is our iman and our zeal to obey Allah and His Messenger. If you and I believe that I will not trade, you will not trade with any of the modern day banks that are charging interest, that bank you mentioned now can spread to this place. But if we cannot get that bank today, then we must make our interactions with the interest-based systems as minimal as possible and as absolutely necessary as possible. When it is not necessarily important, you will not have anything to do with the bank. More so now that we are going to the card, cashless banking. I think it will help the Muslims a lot by not, contributing, going to those banks, borrowing money from them. We have alternatives. There are a lot of alternatives now. The way the world is now, all it needs is that we need to educate ourselves. What are those alternatives? One of which is what you just mentioned, that we have a bank in Nigeria that does not charge interest. So the Muslims in this town could have a voice, write a letter to them, donate a building, and then by the next time you see the bank operating here. And I think in the next 3, 4, 5 years, most of these things will change. Inshallah, over the time. We only need to be ready to change it. I tell you, the big wigs in many of the so-called interest-based banks are Muslims. If they want to change it, they will change it. I know what I'm talking about. We know some of them. If the Muslims decide in this country today, we want to change this, we don't want interest-based banking again, we will have banks all across Nigeria. And even non-Muslims will still bank with us. Because they also prefer the non-interest banking system, including the Jews themselves. Their religion itself prohibits interest-based banking. Even the Christians, their religion prohibits interest-based banking. But it is only the Muslims that have been able to gather a voice to say, no, we don't want. Our religion prohibits it. And even at that, the percentage of the Muslims who are aware of these things is still very low. So we still need a lot of enlightenment regarding the matter. Talking to our rich people, making them know that they have to create alternatives.